Throwaway because my main account is tied to my photography portfolio and I don't want clients finding out about this drama. I'm 32F and I run a small wedding and event photography business out of our loft in the city. My partner, D, 34M, works as a software engineer and we've been together for 6 years. We moved into a spacious 2-bedroom loft last September so I could set up a home studio in the second bedroom. About 5 months ago, D's childhood buddy, K, 33M, lost his apartment after a sudden medical bill wiped out his savings. D insisted we let K stay just until he gets back on his feet, so he moved into the spare room with 2 suitcases and a hopeful grin. D swore it would only be a few weeks. I was hesitant. My studio is sacred space. But I agreed because K and D grew up like brothers. A promising start. At first, K was polite and helpful. He cooked breakfast burritos on Saturdays, vacuumed the living room carpets, and even offered to help lug my heavy light stands during shoot prep. He praised my work on weekends when I was editing, and would make tea while I burned the midnight oil. D beamed every time he saw them laughing over video edits or gaming together. I thought, perhaps having K around might even be fun, subtle encroachments. But by week 3, little things started to grate. K's clothes, shirts, socks, gym shorts, began spilling out of the closet and onto my custom backdrop shelving. He borrowed my steamer to freshen up his suits, then left condensation puddles on my hardwood floor. He'd open studio doors at 7 a.m. to hunt for cereal, waking me before sunrise. I asked him quietly to keep his things in his room and mop up any water. He gave me that half-apologetic shrug and said, sure, then ignored my next 3 reminders, the business impact. In month 2, I landed a lucrative spring wedding season contract with a large event planner. I had to process hundreds of raw files, color-grade dozens of gowns, and deliver final albums on tight deadlines. I locked my studio door to keep interruptions at bay, but Kay started sitting outside, gaming on my studio couch and eating takeout, which meant I could hear every clang of his metal chair and every slurp of his straw. My Wi-Fi lagged and my computer overheated from all the extra devices. My workflow slowed to a crawl. I pleaded with D. He never leaves that room. It's my workspace, not a gaming den. D insisted. He's bored and stressed. Let him decompress, leaving me to juggle calls in the kitchen, broken promises, and mounting costs. That same month, Kay offered to chip in $250 a month for utilities and groceries, since he'd told us his severance should kick in any day. The first payment arrived late and only covered half his share. The second never came. When I reminded him, he apologized profusely but said, I blew that money on a rental car to get to interviews. I then covered his grocery bills myself, because I didn't want to argue in front of D. On top of that, 3 of my studio strobes went missing. Kay said he borrowed them to light a friend's short film and would return them. Weeks later, I found them sitting in his closet, dust-covered and with one cracked umbrella mount. Repairs would cost me hundreds, escalating intrusions. In month 3, Kay started dating H, a graphic designer he met at a co-working space. H visited almost daily, striding past my studio no-entry sign and plopping into my swivel chair to scroll through her phone. They commandeered the foam backdrop wall for selfies, stepping on prop flowers and dripping lip gloss onto the floor. When I scolded H, she rolled her eyes and said, We're just having fun, it's not forever. Kay laughed, Relax, it's your place too, oblivious to the damage he was inflicting on my professional environment. The tipping point. My panic peaked 2 weeks ago. I had a deadline to finalize 6 wedding galleries for a Sunday elopement in the mountains. Friday evening, I set up my laptop in the studio and queued backup exports. At 10 p.m., I heard Kay's booming voice in my second-story loft studio. All right, party time. I stormed in to find H's speaker hooked to my editing rig, blasting techno bass so loud the monitors rattled. Empty wine bottles and snack wrappers littered my backdrop stand. My hard drives, cloned to prevent data loss, lay exposed on the floor under their feet. I begged them to turn it down. Kay sneered, Chill out, this is a party. And H turned to me with a mocking grin. I snapped. I grabbed Kay's speaker, heavy and angular, and hurled it across the room. It slammed into my studio wall, shattering plastic and tossing shards of foam all over the backdrop. The music cut out in a jarring pop. H gasped, "You just destroyed my sound system." D burst in seconds later, drenched from a jog, eyes wide as he surveyed the wreckage and my furious, shaking hands. Aftermath and fallout. K and H fled down the stairs, shouting threats to call the police. D looked at me, stunned, and said, "You actually broke it?" I pointed at the wine-smeared floor and the crumpled drapes, voice shaking. He turned my studio into his personal club. He ignored months of requests. Nothing worked until I showed real consequences. D ran after K, screaming that I went too far, then returned and confronted me. "How could you destroy his property? What if he sues?" I reminded D that K had repeatedly trampled my business and my sanity. That night I slept in my car after grabbing a duffel bag of clothes because the loft felt like a crime scene. The next morning D texted me, "We need to talk. I can't have violence in my home." He gave me an ultimatum, apologized to K and replaced the speaker in full or move out. He said I had 2 days to decide. Friends in our photography network messaged to check if I was okay or if it was some weird workplace dispute. My clients began emailing worried about their galleries. My anxiety spiked. I spent all morning researching small studios to rent. Temporarily. Self-reflection. I know smashing that speaker was extreme. I regret the loss of control and the financial hit, but I also know I've lost sleep, income, and creative focus over this arrangement. I set boundaries from day one, boundaries that K and D both ignored. I asked, begged, and eventually enforced. When my livelihood was at stake, I took the only action that couldn't be brushed aside. Now D and K both refuse to return my calls. The parkour question. So Reddit. Am I the asshole for hurling K's speaker across my studio after months of having my workspace violated? Was I wrong to enact a consequence that hurt him, as extreme as it was, in order to defend my business and mental health? Or should I have quietly endured the chaos until I found a better solution, even if it meant sacrificing my own well-being? Aita? Throwaway because this account's tied to my work portfolio. I'm 26M, and I've been living with my girlfriend E, 24F, in a 2-bedroom condo downtown for the past year. E works as a barista by day and a part-time yoga instructor by night. I'm a junior architect with a small firm. We'd talked about needing an extra room for guests or a future home office, so when her childhood friend S, 25mm, lost his lease last fall, his roommate skipped town and stiffed him for half the rent. E begged me to let him bunk with us just for a couple of weeks. I hesitated, but E swore it would be temporary and I agreed. The friendly arrival. At first S was perfect. He arrived with one duffel bag, practically squealing with relief as we showed him the spare room. He cleaned the shared areas daily, did his laundry in the middle of the night so as not to compete for our machine, and even stocked the pantry with cereal and granola bars. On weekends, he offered to help me with my early morning site visits, waiting with coffee in hand. E beamed, "See, he's so grateful." I relaxed and settled into the idea that S would be out in a blink. Signs of entitlement by the end of UA. The first month, things started to shift. S began sprawling his work-from-home stuff, his laptop, phone charger, notebooks, and half-read paperbacks across my drafting table when I was gone. I'm a creature of habit. I finish sketches late. I need a clear desk in the morning. Finding my T-squares buried under his spiral notebooks of game design ideas felt disrespectful. When I gently asked him to keep his things confined to his room, he flashed me a grin and said, "Bro, it's just a table. I'll clear it when you need it." But he never did. Then came the late-night exercise sessions. S discovered a bodyweight workout online, and at 1 a.m. would start blasting instructional videos, thumping bass, girls hollering "push harder" in the living room. E would chuckle and bring him water, but I'd lie awake trying to draft floor plans. I asked S to use headphones or switch to the bedroom. He waved it off. I need the space. E shrugged each time and muttered, he's got to get in shape. Growing mess and borrowed things. 2 months in, S started hosting strategy sessions with his gamer buddies. 3 or 4 young men would show up at 8 p.m., set up headsets around my coffee table, scatter energy drink cans and pizza boxes across the couch, and settle in for marathon gaming. My cat, Pixel, retreated to my bedroom. The place smelled like pepperoni and stale soda. I asked them politely to move to S's room. They scoffed. Cramming 5 people in a 9x9 spare room wasn't appealing. E called it bonding time, and I learned to grit my teeth. Meanwhile, S borrowed my tools. One Saturday I needed my laser level for a weekend project. It was gone. When I traced it back to his room, he held it like a trophy. I'm using this to hang my shelves. You'll get it back. I reminded him I paid for it and needed it that afternoon. He rolled his eyes. Relax, I'm not taking it to South America. He returned it 2 days later with batteries corroded and a cracked housing. I shelled out $120 for repairs, financial strain and broken promises. S had promised to chip in $200 each month toward utilities and groceries, again, just until I'm stable. The first payment arrived on time. The second was late by a week, arriving in a crumpled envelope stamped IOU. The third? Nothing. I reminded him via text. He told me his parents had stopped sending support. I'm broke, man. I empathized but said rent and food aren't optional. E intervened. Cut him some slack. I ended up covering his share, myself to avoid a fight and to keep E happy. By month 4, my bank account was in the red. I paused my gym membership so groceries for 3 adults wouldn't break me. I started logging into my work account from coffee shops so as not to see reminders of unpaid bills on my checking app. E reassured me it would be fine once S found a job or a new place. But each time I raised the topic, E said, he's depressed. Give him another week. The breaking point, my absolute limit, arrived one Tuesday. I had a critical client review at 7 p.m. and was scrambling to finalize my presentation. S hosted his usual crew at 5:30 p.m., but tonight he had approved a mini-tournament and invited 10 friends. They dragged every couch cushion into the hallway, turning the living room into an obstacle course, shouting and cowbell ringing as they played. My roommate E went to the kitchen to grab a snack and came back with a handful of tortilla chips right onto my floor plan printouts. They crinkled and smeared coffee in the corner. I stormed into the mess, hands on hips. Turn this down, now. A kid shouted, chill, it's a tournament. I said, I have a presentation in 90 minutes, pack up or move it out. S jumped up and shoved me, hard enough to spin me on my heels. You want me out? Fine. He grabbed the speaker. One of those pricey Bluetooth units E and I got as a housewarming gift, and slammed it on the floor. Then he fished a can of energy drink out of the fridge and sprayed it across my printouts, drenching 3 sheets. He yelled, game on, loser, and stormed into our bedroom. Aftermath and Fallout E came running out, horrified. He looked at my ruined plans, then at me, tears in his eyes. What have you done? I cradled the shattered speaker in my arms and said, he did this to my work. He ruined my job. E shook his head. You crossed a line. S burst out, phone already. In hand, calling the cops. He attacked me with a speaker. I backed away, voice trembling. I was defending my work and my home. S hung up and texted a screenshot to E's entire family. By midnight, 2 uniformed officers showed up. They calmly assessed the damage. Shattered speaker, soggy floor, plans, overturned chairs. They asked me to describe what happened. I explained S had refused to turn down his guests and assaulted me. They asked S, but he stuck to his script. He came at me, swung this speaker. Neither of us was arrested, but they advised we resolve it privately and threatened a trespass notice if more calls came. E's ultimatum and isolation. The next morning, E told me over coffee. I'd found myself in a booth again since my home. Office chair was in storage, that I had 2 options, apologize to S and pay for the speaker or move out. He said, this was never your place to enforce. I invited him. I reminded him that it was our lease, that I was paying 2/3 of the rent and half the utilities. He said, "I can't live with someone who breaks things to solve problems." I suggested S find a new place by week's end. E told me I was heartless. Friends and co-workers texted, having heard about the police visit. Yo, smashed speaker. That's a bit extra. Why not just ban people after midnight? My parents flew in on the weekend, offering me their guest room, then sitting me down for a long talk about compromise and familial loyalty. Haya's mum posted a long Facebook rant about roommates in crisis and love tested by adversity, tagging both E and S. E's uncle privately messaged me to say I had huge anger issues. Reflection and question. Now I'm at my parents' house couchsurfing again. My condo sits silent. No designer sketches spread across my drafting table, no coffee-steamed floor plans. E has hired movers to shift his stuff to his sister's place. He told me he needs space to think. I love him, but he's chosen S over me. I lost my home, my career momentum, and my peace of mind in one night. Part of me knows I should have set firmer boundaries up front. Part of me knows I shouldn't have to sacrifice my work for someone else's comfort. So here I am, strangers on Reddit. Am I the asshole for destroying that speaker and ruining S's tournament to defend my workspace and livelihood? Should I have silently endured the chaos until S found a new place? Or was standing up for myself, no matter how dramatic, justifiable when no one else would? Aita. Throwaway because my main account is linked to my teaching career. I'm 28F, and I teach middle school English in a small college town. My fiancée, M, 30F, is finishing her PhD in environmental science and works from home. We've been together 6 years and moved into a 4-bedroom Victorian house last year. Enough room for a home office, a guest room, and a study. About 8 months ago, M's childhood friend K, 29M, lost his job and subsequently his apartment when he couldn't afford rent. He begged M for a place to stay until I get back on my feet, tears in his eyes, and she convinced me it would only be for a few weeks. I agreed. K and M have been close since kindergarten, and I didn't have the heart to say no. The honeymoon. Period. At first, K was unobtrusive. He brought groceries when he could, cooked dinner occasionally, and even offered to help with yard work on weekends. Our home felt lively again, board games at night, laughter over old memories, the scent of M's favorite coffee filling the kitchen. I thought, okay, he's contributing and being respectful. Gradual signs of overreach. By the 3rd week, the cracks began. K moved into the guest room but left his laundry everywhere, piles of unwashed clothes on every chair, socks under the bed, his towel draped across the study desk. He borrowed my lesson plans without asking, stapling pages together and scribbling notes in the margins. When I gently asked him to stop using my teacher resources as his inspiration, he replied, "Oh, come on, you're so precious about your stuff." He shrugged off my request. Then he started sleepwalking through our lives. He'd borrow my desk lamp for late-night reading, leaving my desk dark and my alarm clock buried under textbooks. He commandeered M's second monitor to stream video lectures, leaving M to juggle her Zoom meetings on my bulky old laptop. When I pointed out he should use the study computer, he sighed, "I like this one better," and plugged in headphones so we couldn't hear the music blasting, entitlement, and broken promises. 2 months in, Kay got a part-time gig at a local cafe. Great. News, I thought. But he'd leave half-packed lunches in the fridge, sometimes fermenting, and forget to turn off the oven after baking cupcakes for the cafe specials. I woke at 3 a.m. one night to the entire house smelling burned. Kay had left, a pan smoking on the stove. When I woke him, he mumbled, "I told you I'd handle it," then went back to sleep. He also borrowed M's car one afternoon just to run errands and returned it 3 days later with a cracked windshield. His excuse? I swear I didn't hit anything. I think someone keyed it. I showed him the parking ticket M received for leaving the car blocking a driveway. K hadn't moved it for 48 hours. He grumbled but refused to cover the $250 repair, saying, "Income's tight right now," invading my sanctuary. In my room I keep a small writing nook, a desk, a chair, and a window view perfect for grading papers. One morning I found it filled with K's new startup gear, second-hand office supplies, a whiteboard full of his business ideas, and a ragged yoga mat he insisted on leaving there for morning stretch sessions. I asked him to keep his things in the guest room. He replied, "My head's clearer in here, I'll only be a minute." Those minutes turned into all day, and I could no longer get a single silent moment to plan lessons. Meanwhile, M excused him at every turn. "He's so anxious about his career," she'd say. "He needs space to brainstorm." I reminded M gently that our home wasn't a co-working space, but every time I mentioned boundaries, M's eyes would drift and she'd sigh. I want to help him. The final straw. My breaking point came 2 weeks ago. I was wrapping final grades and assembling summer reading packets when Kay decided to host a strategy session in my office at 10 p.m. He invited 4 of his friends, strangers to me, who brought pizza, beer, and a Bluetooth speaker. They set up folding chairs, turned off the overhead light, and held a late-night hackathon under the glow of my desk lamp. I tiptoed in to reclaim my workspace, only to have one of them shout, "Hey, this is our spot now!" I waited until they left at 1 a.m., then unplugged the speaker and piled their empty beer cans on Kay's desk. The next morning I confronted him. "This is my work area. I asked you months ago to respect my boundaries." He shrugged. "You're so dramatic." "I'm trying to network." I reminded him that I pay for this house. I need a quiet space to work, I had warned you repeatedly. He rolled his eyes and said, "The world doesn't schedule itself around your grading." That afternoon, M intervened. She sat me down in the living room and said, "You know how important K is to me. He doesn't have anywhere else. You need to be more accommodating." I pleaded. "I've lost sleep, missed deadlines, and had clients complain. I'm at my wit's end." M shook her head. "I'm sorry you feel that way. I want you both to get along." Explosion and aftermath. That night, I was preparing my classroom slideshow when Kay strode into my office, headphones on, bumping his rap playlist at full volume. I snapped. I grabbed his phone from the desk, smacked it against the wall, and watched. It bounced to the floor, screen shattering. Kay jumped back, furious. "What the hell?" I screamed that I was davaged by him trampling every boundary, trashing my workspace, stealing my car, and ignoring every request to change. He stormed out, threatening to call the police for destruction of property. M found me in the hallway, panting, pointing at the mangled phone pieces. She said, "You went too far, you attacked him." I told her it was the only way to get his attention, that nothing else had worked. M looked at me with something I didn't recognize, disappointment, and left the room. The fallout. The next morning, M told me to pack a bag and stay with my sister for a few days until things cooled off. Kay packed his things from the guest room into cardboard boxes, sneered through the window as he hauled them to his car, and dumped them on our lawn. He texted M later, "You can keep her if you want, I'm done." M then texted me, "We need to talk. I can't be with someone who loses control like that." My principal refused to cover my classes for the next week, citing safety concerns. I'm now staying with my sister, teaching summer school by day, crashing on her couch at night. M hasn't returned my calls. K blocked me everywhere. Our university-issued tablets ping with reminders of unpaid bills. My classroom remains dark and empty. My question: I know I destroyed K's property. That was extreme. But I feel like I was protecting my home and my career after months of having my life upended. I did ask him calmly. I did set clear boundaries. I did warn that his behavior had real consequences. But nothing changed until I enacted the consequence myself. So, Reddit, am I the asshole for smashing K's phone to defend my workspace and mental health? Or was I justified in finally standing up for myself, even if it cost me my fiancé and my closest friend. Throwaway because I can't risk my main account blowing up. I'm 27F, and my fiancé T 29M, and I have been together for 5 years. We recently bought a century-old craftsman house in the suburbs, fully planning to turn it into our dream home before the wedding this October. 6 months ago, T's younger sister C 24F crashed her car and totaled it. She'd never been able to hold a stable job or save money, and her landlord wouldn't renew her lease once the insurance on her sublet expired. She begged us for a temporary place to stay just until I get back on my feet, looking at T with huge, pleading eyes. He insisted it would only be for a few weeks. I hesitated but agreed. She's family, and I believed in giving her a hand up. At first, C truly tried. She cleaned the gutters one weekend, washed our windows, and even helped me plant perennials in the front beds. I thought, maybe she'll find her footing quickly, but quickly stretched into months. Her car insurance money paid partial rent for 2 months, then vanished in car repairs. She spent rent money on ride shares, bar tabs, and streaming subscriptions. When I asked about rent, she cried that she was depressed and trying to figure things out. T and I let it slide. I'd remind her gently. He'd say, she's under a lot right now. The real trouble began when I started renovating the upstairs guest room for our wedding week guests. I'd gutted the floors and installed hardwood, painted the walls a serene dove grey, and ordered a custom-built Murphy bed with built-in shelving. I told C she could move in there when it was done, so I asked her to keep her things packed in the living room closet until then. Instead, she claimed she didn't trust us with her clothes. What if you have a wild bachelorette party and my stuff gets ruined? And shoved her suitcases into my walk-in closet right behind my future wedding dress the seamstress had delivered and hung in the back. I confronted her. C, you're literally sleeping in my fiancé's old Scout. Den under the stairs. She flashed me a hurt look. I need space, she said. That den feels like a closet and I'm not a child. But when I offered her the dining room nook, it's cozy, you can curtain it off, she refused, saying it was too open and would make me anxious to see you both every day. I realized she was mapping out the entire house for herself, unconcerned about our needs. Meanwhile, C started dating again. J, 25M, a guy she met at a music festival. He showed up most nights, crashing on our living room sofa after unofficial band rehearsals in our garage. Soon the garage smelled of cigarette smoke, and I'd find beer cans under my workbench. I asked them to take rehearsals elsewhere or at least clean up. C glared. You're acting like the landlord already. This is family. J shrugged. It's just a few cans, he said. Relax. I realized this was the same pattern. Promises. To be considerate, followed by entitlement. Then there was the wedding dress incident. 2 weeks ago, I carried my gown down the hall to show my mother and sister over video chat. I set it on the dining table, pristine ivory satin with delicate lace applique. C poked her head around the corner and gasped, "Oh my God, that's so ugly. You look like a giant marshmallow. Why would T marry you looking like that?" Froze. I'd never heard her insult me that blatantly. I politely suggested she keep her thoughts to herself. She laughed and said, "You'd be prettier in something more edgy. Here, let me see if it fits me." Before I could react, she sat on the edge of the table, shimmed into the dress, and preened in front of the full-length mirror. I yanked, it off her, heart pounding. Lace gave under the strain, a seam popped. I was seething. C mocked my reaction. "Relax, it's just a dress." I told her she needed to pay for the repair or forfeit her stay here. She scoffed and said, "You've had your fiancé paying my rent for months. You think you can nickel and dime me over a ripped dress?" T backed her up. "It was an accident. You're overreacting." I reminded him that my wedding was 2 months away and the seamstress's schedule was booked. He sighed and said, I'll handle it. I realized I was losing control over our own home and our own lives. My breaking point came last Sunday. I'd spent the afternoon with my mother planning the table layout for the rehearsal dinner when C and J decided to host a surprise after-party in our backyard. They invited 15 people without asking. I returned home at dusk to flashing fairy lights strung from the eaves, loudspeakers booming indie dance music, and strangers sprawled on our new patio furniture, drinking cheap canned cocktails. My mother stood beside me, stunned. I marched out and asked them to take it down immediately. Jay sneered, "It's a party for my band's new single set to debut tomorrow. You'll be on the press release," C added. "Yeah, come on, sis, live a little before the big day," I snapped. I grabbed the speaker wires and yanked them from the amp. The music stuttered and died. 2 of Jay's bandmates shoved me aside, grabbing cables back. I threw a potted fern at the equipment rack. 1 amp hit the ground and cracked. Someone yelled, "What's wrong with you?" As I shouted that they had no right to turn my backyard into a venue, T emerged from the house. His eyes were wide. He put a hand on my shoulder. Okay, calm down." The band packed up in a panic. They left fuming, threatening to see me at the gig. That night, T and I had our first big fight. He said I humiliated C and her friends, that I was trying to pretend this is all about the wedding when you've always resented her presence here. I reminded him that C was welcome only temporarily, yet she'd been destructive, rented our home of her own volition, invaded every space, insulted my dress, ripped my designer sewing. He countered that I should have set firmer boundaries from the start. I said he should have taken my side. We argued until 3 a.m. I cried that I felt like a stranger in my own home. The next morning, C left our house with her bags, but not before sending me a text. "Hope you enjoy living with your perfect dress and mother's opinion. You'll be single in 2 months." She moved in with our parents. Shockingly, they sided with her, convinced I was a bridezilla who kicked her baby sister to the curb. My mother called me later, pleading for a truce. T's family stopped answering my calls. Invitations to the bridal shower never arrived. The groomsmen blocked me on social media. My vendor for rehearsal dinner threatened to cancel because they heard there was family drama. I'm torn. Yes, I went too far smashing that amp and ripping out their cords. I screamed and threw a plant in their direction, but I've tolerated months of disrespect. Loud music at dawn, unauthorized gigs in my yard, insults to my appearance, negligence of rent, and blatant disregard for my wedding plans. I did ask them repeatedly to clean up and respect our space. I did warn them there were consequences, and I did everything in my power to apologize before things escalated. I never wanted to break family bonds or jeopardize my marriage, but I couldn't sacrifice my home, my wedding, or my mental health. So Reddit. Am I the asshole for setting an unbreakable boundary, ripping out the speakers, and effectively evicting my sister and her boyfriend, knowing it might cost me my fiancé's support, my parents' love, and my own peace of mind? Or was I justified in defending my future, my sanctuary, and the wedding of my dreams? Because right now I'm living in a half-finished house with my fiancé distant, my family fractured, and a wedding calendar looming, wondering if I'm the villain in my own story. I'm desperate for clarity. Please help. Throw away because my main account is tied to my professional network. I'm 33M, and for the past 2 years my fiancée N, 31F, and I have been happily living together in her family's 2-story townhouse while saving to buy our own place. Late last year, N's cousin S, 26M, lost his job and with it his apartment. He couch-surfed at friends' places before landing at our door one evening, eyes hollow and voice trembling as he begged for "just until I get back on my feet." N convinced me it would only be a few weeks, so I agreed. S and I had never been particularly close, but I trusted N's judgment. At first, S was almost grateful to the point of servitude. He stocked our kitchen with his meager savings, vacuumed the living room without being asked, and insisted on doing laundry and dishes. N beamed. See, he's totally pulling his weight. Even I felt foolish for my quiet misgivings, but those initial weeks stretched into months. The guest room became S's de facto man cave. Boxes of video games, cables snaking over every surface, empty snack wrappers dotting the floor. He slept until noon most days, then emerged for takeout lunches, leaving the wrappers by my computer desk, and retreated to binge-watch anime on the living room couch. I work remotely as a content strategist. I need a quiet environment and clear boundaries between work and home. But S's harmless habits quickly piled up. The movies he streamed at high volume rattled the walls. When I asked him to use headphones, he sneered, "I pay rent too." Though his contributions were sporadic and usually late, I reminded him that our lease stipulated only N and me, so we'd agreed he wasn't on the hook for rent, only groceries. He countered that groceries covered takeout and beer, conveniently ignoring his daily soda habit that emptied our recycling bins by midday. When I spoke to N, she placated me. He's stressed about job hunting. Give him space. But the space, he claimed, overflowed into my life. He commandeered my work chair for his long gaming sessions, leaving me to hunch over kitchen stools. He borrowed my laptop to check a fact and returned it 3 days later with a cracked hinge. My biggest project yet, a month-long advertising campaign, nearly derailed because my laptop refused to close properly, and I couldn't risk it in a client meeting. 2 months in, S began dating his co-worker, J, who visited several nights a week and also contributed to the clutter. What started as innocent movie nights turned into poker games with Jay's friends, complete with spilled beer, poker chips under the couch, and cigarette smoke that wafted through the stairwell. I started sleeping on a mattress in the guest room, just to escape cigarette stench. When I returned to the main bedroom, I'd find ash on my pillow. I asked S to enforce a no-smoking rule indoors. He shrugged and said, "We're only outside on the balcony. If you don't like it, use air." Fresheners. My tolerance snapped the night before a pitch presentation. I'd spent the entire day rehearsing slides in my home office. That evening, S and J set up their mobile DJ rig in the backyard, blasting EDM so loud my windows vibrated. I pounded on. The back door, "Turn it down or move it." S hollered back, "Chill, dude, it's just a bit of fun." I yelled that I had a 9 a.m. client call and needed quiet. He laughed. "You can turn on your noise-cancelling headphones, problem solved." I froze, rage coursing through me. In a blur, I grabbed the heavy amplifier speaker and dragged it to the sidewalk, dropping it hard enough to crack its casing. The bass stuttered into silence and came bursting out, her face a mask of disbelief. S, livid, called me a psycho and bent to pick up the broken speaker. I pushed him away and said, "That's yours. Enjoy fixing it." N gasped. "You can't just destroy his stuff," I shot back. "He can't just destroy my livelihood and sleep, my workspace, my peace." Hess stormed off, collecting his things in under 10 minutes. He threw Jay's clothes onto the sidewalk, too, cursing as he hauled boxes to his car. N looked at me, teary-eyed, and whispered, "Why did you have to break it? Why couldn't you just ask?" The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with a stack of apology emails I'd drafted, but N refused to let me send them. "You owe him more than apologies," she said. "You owe him money." She laid out the speaker's replacement cost, $450. "If you won't apologize and pay, you're kicking him out. You're kicking me out too," she said, arms crossed. My heart sank. Her ultimatum meant our shared future was on the line. I reminded her that S had overstayed his temporary stay by 4 months, standing firm that he needed to find a place. She replied that her loyalty to family outweighed my need for boundaries. Word of the fight spread through our circle. Friends started sending concerned texts. "Why did you break his speaker? Isn't that an overreaction?" Or, "You're making S homeless again. What kind of partner does that?" My work suffered. The next day's client rescheduled after I missed my call in a fit of tears. My mental health tanked. I couldn't sleep without hearing the echo of N's fury. I toyed with leaving, but I had nowhere else to go, and frankly, the townhouse was as much mine as hers. A week later, S posted on social media that he'd been evicted without notice, tagging both me and N in a long rant about betrayal and emotional abuse. N's parents bombarded me with messages, insisting I toughen up and learn to be more gracious. N refused to pick up my calls. I spent nights wandering the deserted townhouse, pausing in S's abandoned gaming corner, feeling both vindicated and hollow. I loved N, but our shared home had become a battleground. I loved my work, but my sanctuary was gone. I wondered if in standing up for myself, I'd become the villain. So here I am, strangers of Reddit. Am I the asshole for breaking S's speaker to defend my right to a peaceful home and workspace after months of chaos? Was it unreasonable to think a temporary guest should adhere to basic courtesy? Or should I have swallowed my anger, continued sacrificing my comfort, and risked burning out just to preserve N's family harmony? I'm torn between self-preservation and guilt, and I need your verdict, aita. Throwaway because my real account is tied to my small baking business. I'm 30F, and I run a home-based pastry shop called Sweet Crust Delights. My partner, A, is 32M and works in software development. We've been together for 4 years and moved into a 3-bedroom bungalow last June so I could convert the garage into my bakery kitchen. About 9 months ago, my college friend L, 29F, lost her apartment when her landlord sold the building. She begged for a place to stay, promising only a month until she got on her feet. A and I agreed. L and I have been best friends since freshman year, and I felt bad tossing her onto the streets. At first, L was the perfect house guest. She helped me test recipes, wrapped cupcakes in pretty boxes, and took the occasional customer order when I was swamped. I liked having the extra company. He'd come home to the smell of lavender macarons and homemade bread. We had dinner together most nights, laughing about our college antics and reminiscing about road trips. L paid $300 a month toward groceries and utilities, which I thought was fair given our rent and her minimal storage space. By the end of the first 2 months, cracks began to show. L started borrowing my best pans without asking, leaving sticky residue on them, then hiding them in piles of her laundry. Our living room doubled as her bedroom. She slept on the couch in winter, despite 2 empty bedrooms, citing that garage storage felt too spooky with the bare concrete. She scattered her clothes and makeup everywhere, and instead of the 1 trash bag a week I generated, we had 4 overflowing bags by Friday, filled with takeout containers and makeup wipes. When I gently reminded her to throw out her garbage, she snapped, "I'm busy job hunting," then went silent for days. Meanwhile, business was booming. I pivoted to online orders, offering customized wedding cakes and corporate boxes. I spent evenings kneading dough and mornings photographing tarts for Instagram. My kitchen counter was my altar, and I couldn't afford clutter or distractions. But L treated my workspace like communal storage. She stashed 6 months' worth of hand-me-down clothes in clear plastic bins on my mixing table, draping scarves over my stand mixer. My dough would sometimes develop lint from stray fibers, forcing me to toss batches. I tried compromise. I bought her a small clothing rack and asked her to keep her things there. She agreed, but reverted within days. She claimed the rack wobbled. So she just left her stuff on the counter. When I moved it to her bedroom, she accused me of being controlling. Whispered that I was overreacting, that L was depressed and needed freedom to spread out. I reminded him that my livelihood depended on a sanitized, organized kitchen. He said, "She'll get used to it." 3 months in, L started dating a guy she met at a coffee shop, M, 31M, who joined her at our place every weekend. I liked M at first. He complimented my chocolates and even sketched logo ideas. But soon they commandeered my entire counter for their art projects: acrylic paints, glue guns, colored paper. One Saturday, I returned from a farmer's market run with organic berries and vanilla beans, only to find half the berries trampled under M's wet watercolor palette. The vanilla beans had rolled into a puddle of mixed paint. I was livid, but when I asked L and M to be more careful, they pouted that I was unwelcoming of their creativity. Money troubles followed. L borrowed $500 from me for an upcoming emergency dental appointment, promising to pay me back from her unemployment benefits. A month later, she still hadn't paid. I reminded her. She said she'd recently lost her benefits because of some paperwork issue, that she'd cover it next week. Weeks passed. Meanwhile, I had to hire an assistant to help catch up on orders. Dipping into my savings I'd earmarked for a new convection oven. Then came the theft. One evening I discovered that my entire stash of macaroon shells, 24 flavors, weeks of careful piping and drying was missing. I searched the pantry, the shelving units, the freezer. The only clue was Elle's half-eaten bag of shells in the trash. When I confronted her, she said with wide eyes that M probably ate them, that they thought they were left over from last week's tasting. She offered to replace them, but macaroon shells take days to make and dry. I had clients lined up for custom boxes the next morning. I had to cancel those orders and refund hundreds of dollars. My breaking point came last Thursday. I was prepping for a major wedding order, 5 tiers of fondant flowers and 300 mini pastries due Saturday morning. I had my calendar marked in bright pink, bake or die. L and M were painting yet again on my counter, giggling over spilled watercolor dust. I asked them firmly to clean up and vacate the kitchen until my order was complete. L glared and snapped, "I live here too, you can't boss us around." I retorted that my kitchen was special, off-limits to her hobbies, and it was my business. She yelled, "Your business? You mean the business you shoved me into this mess for? You're free, intern." I saw red. I grabbed Elle's painting canvas off my counter. They'd glued feathers onto a homemade mask and hurled it across the room. Feathers, dried paint, and all, bursting apart on impact. Elle shrieked and rushed me. I slapped her hand away, terrified. We'd escalate to blows. She ran to the bedroom, locking the door. I realized I'd crossed a line. Destroying her art felt vindictive, but I also felt vindicated. She'd wrecked my work for months without consequence. I burst into my kitchen seconds later and looked between us, face pale. Elle was crying behind him, clutching ripped canvas scraps. A asked what happened. I gestured at the ruined mask. They sighed, turned to Elle, said, "You two need to cool off." Then he grabbed my arm and murmured, "You can't treat her like this. She has nowhere else." I explained how Elle had sabotaged my business, stole money, trashed my kitchen. He shook his head. "She's our guest. You owe her an apology." Later, Elle packed her canvas and brushes and left for a friend's house. She texted at midnight, "You owe me for the mask too. I'll charge you when I get settled." The next morning, A told me to apologize to Elle and replace her art supplies, or he'd stay with her until I made amends. I refused. He stormed out, saying he couldn't be with someone so cold. I've spent the last 2 nights at my bakery, sleeping on the couch among my racks and mixing bowls. Business is suffering without my full-time attention. Orders are backing up. I've fielded awkward calls from Elle demanding payment for ruined art, and A hasn't replied to my texts. My parents plead for peace. Friends are split. Some side with me, others with Elle, calling me selfish. So Reddit, am I the asshole for defending my livelihood, smashing Elle's art when she invaded my workspace, and refusing to apologize or reimburse her? Should I swallow my pride to salvage my relationship, even if it means letting Elle keep destroying my dream? Or was I right to set an absolute boundary for my home and business? I'm torn between protecting what I built and the guilt of hurting someone who once was family. Please help. Throwaway account because friends and family know my real one. I'm 29F. My boyfriend E is 31M, and we've been together for 8 months. We moved in together last December into a cozy 2-bedroom apartment in the city. I work from home as a freelance graphic designer, and E works remotely for a software company. We'd agreed we needed the extra bedroom for future guest visits, but I knew E always meant his best friend R, 30M, who's essentially his chosen brother. I didn't mind, at least not at first, but I should have known better than to let hope override reality. R's apartment flooded 6 months ago. He was scrambling between friends' couches and cheap hostels when one Saturday morning he turned up on our doorstep with 2 overstuffed duffel bags, a ratty sleeping bag, and eyes that begged for mercy. E opened the door halfway through my morning Zoom call, and before I could protest, waved him inside. "He'll only be here a week or 2, I promise," E said, "just until he gets back on his feet." And I, ever the peacemaker, relented, though my stomach churned as I showed R to the spare room. The first couple of weeks passed almost pleasantly. R brought groceries when his money allowed, and he cooked elaborate breakfasts, omelettes, pancakes, muffins, most weekends. E was thrilled. "See? He's contributing." I nodded dutifully while shelving my irritation at the trail of pans. He left dirty in the sink, but I chalked it up to adjustment and assumed things would normalize. By the end of the first month, the apartment felt less like mine and more like a public hostel with rotating guests. Char's half-crushed cans of soda lined the windowsill, his mismatched socks littered the bathroom floor, and the guest room door was never closed. He slept in until noon, then staggered out for takeout lunches, returning with greasy containers that sat unrefrigerated until they oozed. I reminded him politely, once, twice, to toss the trash and wash his dishes. He'd flash me a charming grin, mutter, "On it," then vanish for hours. Meanwhile, E defended him. "He's been through so much," he'd say, peering over his laptop in the living room. "He's under a lot of stress." I tried talking through it. "It's not just the mess, E. It's the noise. He blasts heavy metal at 8 a.m. and plays YouTube videos on full volume all day." "I can't concentrate," E sighed. "He's just decompressing, it'll get better." But it never did. 2 months in, R started dating my co-worker J, who lives across the hall. They met through a shared digital marketing group and hit it off at a virtual trivia night. J told me R was incredibly sweet and funny, which I found almost offensive. R's humor is juvenile, his sweetness reserved for when he needs something. Still, I smiled through my skepticism, pretending to be happy for them. J began leaving her yoga mat rolled out in our living room. She claimed it was more spacious, and bottles of protein shakes, which R drank in my fridge without asking. I reminded R that those were J's, but he shrugged. She said it was fine. Then came the laptop incident. I use my MacBook Pro for work, it's my livelihood. One night, R asked to borrow it, just to tweak my resume. I unlocked it for him, watched him leave my home office with it, and assumed he'd return it by morning. Instead, he showed up 3 days later with a cracked screen. "It slipped," he said. "I'll pay you back next week." Next week turned into soon. Then, "I lost my wallet." Then, "I'll Venmo you." Nothing ever arrived. In the meantime, I had deadlines looming, designs to send out, clients waiting. I had to buy a replacement out of pocket, using credit I couldn't afford to carry. When I confronted E, he was nonchalant. "He's going through a rough patch, babe. He'll get you back." I felt ridiculous even saying it. That was the point when I began to realize how deeply enmeshed E was in R's orbit. E started taking R's side every time I raised an issue. "He's my best friend," he would say, arms crossed. "You signed up for this roommate deal too." I reminded him gently that our lease specified only the 2 of us, but E waved me off. "Don't stress, he'll find a place soon." By month 3, the apartment was chaos. R's wet towels draped over the bookshelf, his unwashed bowls crusted on the coffee table. His clothes overflowed from the guest room closet, creeping into the hallway. He borrowed my car, once for an emergency, another time to pick up groceries, returning it with the gas tank near empty, and one night with a busted taillight. He said he forgot to account for the slope in our driveway. I argued that the car was mine and he had no right. R glared. E shrugged. "It's okay, I'll cover it," he said to me, ignoring that it was my car, my insurance. I began sleeping fitfully, heart pounding whenever I heard the thump of R's footsteps or the thrum of his music. My productivity plummeted. I'd log on to client calls looking ghostly pale, apologizing for my muffled microphone and distracted energy. I slipped behind on bills, borrowing from friends and sliding further into debt. My anxiety skyrocketed. One morning I woke at 5 a.m. to the screech of power cords escaping R's Bose speaker. I stumbled into the living room, bleary-eyed, asking him to turn it down. He laughed and said, "Make me." He raised the volume. I shot back, "Do it. Again and I'll break it." He rubbed his temples and switched to folk music, rolling his eyes at me. At this point, E no longer intervened in my favor. He'd looked at me with disappointment. "Why can't you let him live a little? He's always been impulsive." I realized the we in our relationship had fractured. E and I were no longer a unit. I was pitted alone against his lifelong friend. I tried compromise. I bought a noise-cancelling headset, moved my desk to the corner of our bedroom, used earplugs. But the clutter and chaos seeped into every corner of my life. I started having panic attacks when I saw grocery bags left, unopened on the floor, when I found R's social media followers crashing on our couch. I felt a violation of my safe space. Then came the worst. 2 weeks ago, I was up all night working on a 15-slide client pitch due at 8 a.m. I'd barely slept, subsisting on coffee and adrenaline. At 4 a.m., R blasted an EDM remix so loud my walls shook. I yelled through the door, "Turn it off!" He laughed and knocked a lamp off the side table, shattering the glass shade. I lost it. I grabbed the aux cord, wrestled it from the speaker, and smashed the speaker onto the floor. The plastic exploded in a shower of fragments. R screamed, "You psycho!" and lunged at me. I backed away, trembling, adrenaline flooding my veins. He spun around and ran from the room, calling the cops on his way out. E came charging down the hallway as I stood in the carnage, panting, tears streaming down my face. R was cradling the remains of his speaker, shouting that I had assaulted him without reason. E glared at me with horror and said, "You crossed a line." I fell to my knees, voice cracking. "He's destroyed everything I own, E. He's turned my home into his playground. I can't live like this." E shook his head. "He's my brother. You can't just treat him like a guest you can evict." I said, "He isn't a guest, he's a roommate on our lease. You signed the lease, you can ask him to leave." E looked away, silent. The next morning I packed a bag and moved back to my mother's guest bedroom. I offered to reimburse half the rent until R found a new place. E didn't respond. R stayed put, posting happy selfies of him and E at concerts, brunches, painting classes. My DMs filled with scolding messages from E's sister and parents. How could I exile a friend in need? They accused me of being selfish, unkind, even cruel. They demanded I send a heartfelt apology, that I convince R to return and make things right. I refused. I couldn't reconcile my need for boundaries with their insistence on unconditional hospitality. I've lost clients over missed deadlines, piled up late fees, erased my savings on ripped and replaced items. Laptop, headphones, a chair R cracked when he forgot how to adjust the height. My therapist says I did what was necessary to protect my mental health. Friends have rallied around me, but many have friended E and R on social media now and posted passive-aggressive stories about drama among roommates. JR's girlfriend told me in private she hates the mess too, but fears the fallout if she sides with me. She said R gaslit her after the speaker incident, making it sound like I ambushed him. Now she won't return my calls. The floor plan feels different when I think of that apartment. Every inch marred by R's presence and E's enabling. The night I smashed the speaker, I felt an electric relief, as though I'd shattered more than plastic. I'd shattered the illusion that this was a home for two people in love. Now I live in my childhood bedroom again, surrounded by floral wallpaper and my old stuffed animals, feeling both comforted and trapped. I can't afford to move back. I'm rebuilding my credit, saving for a deposit. I'm considering a smaller studio. E has ghosted me. I don't know if our relationship can survive. I don't know if I want it to. So here I am, strangers of Reddit. Am I the asshole for defending my boundaries at the cost of a friendship and possibly my relationship? Am I unreasonable for expecting my partner to protect my workspace and mental health? Or should I swallow my pride and apologize to E and R, even if it means erasing months of disrespect? Because right now, it feels like I'm the only one who remembers that a home should be a sanctuary, not a never-ending sleepover. And maybe that makes me the asshole. I'm lost. Please help. Throw away because friends and family read Reddit. I'm 29F, and for the past 8 months I've been dating E, 31M. We moved in together last December. 6 months ago, E's best friend R, 30M, lost his apartment to a flood. He'd been crashing on couches since then, but one Saturday morning he showed up at our door with 2 duffel bags and puppy eyes. E invited him to stay until he could sort things out, so R moved into our guest room. I was hesitant. R and I had sparred over board games in college, and he was messy as hell, but I reluctantly agreed. At first, R was polite. He cooked breakfast on weekends and helped with groceries, but by week 3 I was tiptoeing around his overflowing laundry piles and the stench of unwashed dishes. I work from home as a freelance graphic designer. My days are headphones and silence. R would blast heavy metal at 8 a.m., then drip coffee grounds down the hallway. I asked him to clean up. He offered vague apologies, then ignored my follow-ups. When I confronted E, he brushed it off. He's had a rough time. Let him get comfortable. 2 months in, R started dating my co-worker, J, who lives across the hall and worked in PR. J told me R was charming and artistic, which I found infuriating. R's only art is graffiti on bathroom walls. Then he borrowed my laptop, under the guise of editing a resume, and left it with a cracked screen. I bought a new one, but R never paid me back. When I reminded him, he sighed and said, "I'll get you when I can," then proceeded to borrow my car without asking. One evening, I came home to find my taillight shattered, and R's excuse was, "I forgot it was parked on a slope." By month 4, I felt like a guest in my own home. E would sidestep my concerns. He's my best friend. He'll leave when he's ready. Meanwhile, R left constant traces of himself everywhere. Wet towels on the couch, half-eaten pizza on, my desk strangers from gigs sleeping over. I'd wake up to unfamiliar yoga mats and protein shake bottles. Every time I asked R to keep it down, he'd glare and mumble, "This is my second home now." My breaking point came 2 weeks ago. I was finishing a project with an all-nighter deadline when R blasted his music so loud the entire apartment vibrated. I begged him to turn it off. He mocked me, saying, "Chill out, Karen," and cranked it higher. I snatched the aux cord and smashed his speaker on the floor. He stormed into my office, yelling he'd call the cops. I told him to get out, right. Then he found us screaming in the hallway. R was crying about betrayal and how I attacked him. E glared at me and said, "You crossed a line." I pleaded, "He's been here for months. He's ruined my work, my sleep, my peace." E replied, "He's my brother. You can't just kick family out." R packed some clothes into garbage bags, muttering about suing me for assault. The aita. Next day, E told me to leave if I couldn't get along with his friend. So I moved back to my mum's guest bedroom temporarily. E still lives with R, and they post happy selfies online. My bank account's drained from new things, R broke, and his unpaid loans. My clients are late on payments because I missed deadlines recovering from stress. I've doubled down on therapy and confided in 2 co-workers, one of whom is J, R's girlfriend. J told me privately that R gaslit her about the smashed speaker, making her think I was the villain. He now treats me like a stranger, and his family, who adored me, are furious at me for allegedly kicking out a friend in need. This weekend, E's sister texted, "Since you couldn't handle having a friend crash, you have to apologize and make things right." I replied that I'm not sorry for protecting my mental health and my workspace. She answered, "Tough love, huh? You'll regret burning bridges." Now my phone's blowing up with messages demanding I reconcile or lose E permanently. Meanwhile, R raffled off my designer clothes to pay off my new laptop. I keep replaying everything. Yes, I was harsh with the speaker, but it was the culmination of 8 months of disrespect and entitlement. Yes, R had nowhere else to go, but E's enabling turned my home into R's playground. And yes, it hurt to smash R's speaker, but in that moment I was defending boundaries E refused to uphold. So, readers, here's where I stand. I moved out to save my sanity, even if it means losing E and our life together. I refuse to apologize for demanding respect and a pristine workspace. But my entire social circle thinks I'm the villain. My instincts tell me I did the right thing, but I feel guilty, like I abandoned someone who needed help. Am I the a-hole?